Oh my God. After like a year and a half of doing Zoom events, just to have an actual pause for applause where people can clap just feels really amazing. So thank you all. Please do loads of like whooping and yelping, anything that really adds to the in-person vibe, because I'm feeling it. So as Emer says, hi, I'm Sasha. I'm the director of Cork in Galway, and I am, as you can probably tell, deeply excited to be doing an in-person event as part of the West Cork Literary Festival this year. I am going to be having a bit of a conversation with Stephen and Louise this evening, and they're going to read a bit from their books, and then we'll also have a chance to hear from you, as mentioned. Please don't be scared to ask a question. This is the first human contact we've had in so long. You need to make the most of it. I implore you. So I'll do a bit of an intro, and then after that, we'll get started. So Louise, his work has been published in The Stinging Fly, The Tangerine, Bantry, Wasafiri, and Ambit, and she's been shortlisted twice for the Sunday Times Audible Short Story Award, 2 years in a row, no less. She's written for The Guardian, The Times, BBC Radio 4, and RTE. The End of the World is a Cul-de-Sac is her first book, and was called a dazzling, heart-breaking debut by The Guardian, and electric by The Sunday Times, and they're not wrong. Stephen Walsh, his work has been published in The White Review, The Stinging Fly, and broadcast on RTE Radio. Since beginning writing seriously in 2018, his stories have been shortlisted for the White Review Short Story Prize, the Royal Society of Literature V.S. Pritchett Short Story Award, the RTE Francis McManus Story Competition, and the Fish Short Story Prize, right down here in Bantry. Exciting stuff. And Shine Variance is his first collection and published by Chad Owen Windus. So please join me in welcoming Stephen and Louise. That was a mouthful. You guys have many accolades. Thank you so much for being here. Would you guys like to kick us off with a bit of a reading? Get it out the way early. Yeah.
You go ahead, yeah.
Fab, Louise.
So this is from the second story. I think it's the second story, and it's called In Silhouette. And it's about a teenage girl who gets dollied up to go out one night in somewhere near the border in the late 70s, and something happens to her that I suppose changes her life, and she tries to get away from it but can't really. So this is it's in sort of different passages. So this is probably it's from maybe 4 years later when she's in her early 20s and working on a cosmetics counter in a department store somewhere where she thinks she's got away. One of the security guards comes in. He's the man who patrols the store for unattended bags, for accents like yours. He fills a cup with water from the boiler. There are 4 free seats at the table, but he sits in the one opposite you. He taps a sachet of dried soup into the hot water and stirs, takes a paper bag from his pocket. His sandwich is flat and damp and homemade too. He smiles at you and your face twitches with something you hope will pass for civility. You're Irish, he says. You prepare to answer, breaking up words in your mouth and reassembling them to remove the moany vowels of the place you come from, but he keeps talking. His name is Sean the way he says it. His mum is from Carlow, which makes him eligible to play football for the Republic of Ireland. He laughs to confirm he's making a joke. In the afternoon, you shift 6 gift bags and sell a tube of cleavage cream to a woman in a burqa with beautiful feet. He's by the swing door when you leave, walkie-talkie and polyester epaulets swapped for a striped, short-sleeved shirt with a button-down collar. Sorry, I always regret that line because there's like a lot of alliteration. There's too many consonants. He acts surprised to see you, says he's going your way. He asks if you've time for a quick one, a drink, obviously. He does the laugh again. The pub is opposite the tube station. You sit under a huge window that's misty with diesel fumes and fly spray. He asks if you'd like a Pimm's. Oh yes, you say, as though you know what it is. It comes in a dimpled beer glass with chunks of cucumber and apple in it. I don't know whether to eat it or drink it, you say, and the woman at the next table stares at you and says something into her man's ear. She's wearing a lady-dye blouse like yours. He asks you questions as though he's reading them from a list. Do you come from a big family? I've an older brother and 3 wee sisters. What does your brother do? He's waiting for a job to come up. Thought he would smirk at your answer. He's 3 deaths away from going on hunger strike. Sean finishes his pint in one gulp and crosses the yeasty floral carpet to the gents. The woman at the next table is leaning into her man, pointing at the floor where you've put your white patent leather handbag. You pick it up, root in it, fingers moving over the greasy leather. Thaddeus wing is in lockdown and your mother hasn't seen him for months. You try to imagine your brother in a blanket, his hair matted with shite, but you can't picture him. You take out a lipstick and drag it slowly across your mouth, pressing your lips together when you're done. Then you use it to write 4 big letters across the side of your bag. Sean appears, poking at the waistband of his trousers. There's a light on the wall above his head, and his face is grey and shiny. He takes quick, light steps to the payphone and lifts the receiver, presumably to ring the woman who made his sandwich. You turn your handbag so the couple at the next table can read it. You've written bomb in shade 1981, English rose.
Thank you. That was lovely. Stephen, would you like to give us a taster?
Sure. I love that story, Louise.
Oh, it's amazing. I love moany vowels. What a great phrase.
I'll read a little bit from the first story in the collection. So this only came out 10 days ago, so I hope the ink is actually dry on it. It seems to be. The story's called Dolphins of Seville. When I wrote it, I thought it was about the most boringly ordinary situation you can be in, which is booking a flight and going on a holiday. It now turns out it's a work of high fantasy. But hopefully we get back to these situations. So it's a woman just about to start going on a run on the first day of her holiday. Fiona was finally on the first run of the holiday. She had the sea in her sights. It had not been straightforward to get to this point. To start with, she'd had to get her trainers past Ronan. We recommend 2 20-kilo bags for families. Oh, sure, family special. Click on that and that's another €100 for you, Ronan had said to the laptop when he was booking the flight. You recommend, yeah? I didn't come up to Liffey in a fucking wicker basket. 1 bag will do the 2 of us and the boys can carry theirs on. That's not enough. The boys won't manage, Fiona said. Size them, Fiona. Connor's 14, Liam's 10, well able to carry their own weight in the world. Don't bring anything you can't carry on your back, as my dad would say. Like in the army, she asked. Exactly. Now we're winning. This year, he was in charge of the holiday. He had chosen the 1 bag option. She pushed on, thinking of how Ronan pushed ahead of them all at check-in. He placed the bag on the scales. 22 kilos. I'm sorry, sir, but the maximum allowance is 20 kilos, the agent said. That makes no sense. It weighed exactly 20 in the house. Your scales must be rigged. You can pay for the extra weight, the agent said. Oh, I know I can, Marta, he said, staring the agent down. You'd love that, wouldn't you? But that's not going to happen. He pulled the bag off the scales and opened it. Do you mind standing aside while you do that? Martha asked him. As he dug through the layers, Fiona waited for Ronan to discover the contrabands that had tipped the balance. Her new trainers, bright blue, in the bottom of the bag. He held them up to her. Did these go in after I weighed and sealed? Who does that? I only have my sandals, said Connor. Me too, and only 4 pairs of jocks, said Liam. 4 is plenty. You'd be in your swimming gear most of the time anyway, said Ronan. He'd supervised their packing, only essential items. But now there was a trainer crisis to contend with, and, as it transpired, a further pair of unsanctioned sandals. He stared up at Fiona from the floor, inviting her to come up with a justification for this outrageous transgression. Give the trainers to me, I'll just wear them, she said. Then we'd have to put those in, he said, pointing at the shoes she was wearing. It just goes round and round. Ronan shoved a trainer into each of the boys' backpacks and approached Marta for a second weigh-in. 21 kilos. Marta looked at him, then Fiona, then pushed the bag down the belt. We got away with it, he said as they walked towards security. Free kilo. We're winning, lads. Fiona's trainers peered back at her from each of the boys' dangerously overstuffed and open pockets of their backpacks. They could easily fall out and separate. She pushed them back down as the boys stood in front of her in the boarding queue for Alicante. I bet you don't get even out for a run, Ronan said. She turned down the seafront, feeling light and untethered. She'd overcome the second obstacle, not loading up at breakfast. The strategy, Ronan had explained, was to go large at breakfast and last through to dinner. Unnecessary lunches and random drinks is how things rack up and get out of control, he'd explained. I like a lunch, Fiona had told him when he presented his packet choice. No, you don't know where you are after big lunch, he said. He'd chosen half-board in a complex that had been rated good on the review sites. Good is good, isn't it? He said. The sun shines just as bright on a 2-star hotel. And the package was all exclusive, except for lunch. Ronan and the boys had stuck to the plan and gone large that morning. She'd watched blue syrup from pancakes ooze onto neon scrambled eggs. Croissants were stacked on top of sausages. The plates supporting the weight could not be seen. This should keep us going for starters, lads, Ronan said. Are you seriously going to eat all that, she asked. It's a waste if you don't. No, it isn't, because it's free, said Connor. Dad said to take one of everything to see what we like, and then we can go back for the best things later. That's how you win, said Liam. But you have 3 pancakes, Liam, she said. Yeah, but I knew I'd like them. Stop there? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. It's such a pleasure to hear just short stories read in an actual space. I'll get over it in a minute, I swear. But yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Stephen, you mentioned, that the book came out just 10 days ago, and Louise, your book came out earlier this year. And I just wanted to know, how does it feel being a debut writer in the year that's in it? It's a pretty unique experience you're going through.
I mean, for me, it feels as brilliant as it would have happened any time in my life. I think the lockdown stuff, to me, it doesn't really matter. It's just the act of getting a book out there and getting it into the hands of readers is fantastic. It'd be great to do more stuff as the world opens up again, but any time you do it is a brilliant time, I think. How you feel?
Yeah, I kind of liked it. I felt sort of protected from it because I didn't really have to leave the house much, so I was just like getting traumatized at my kitchen table for about 3 times a week for a little while. So yeah, it was okay.
That's true. I guess like once the publicity's over, you're like in your pajamas already.
Well, that's it. Yeah, you just like get out of the pajamas for half an hour and do a Zoom or something. Yeah,
yeah, that's totally fair. And something that you both have in common is that you've come to writing a little bit later in your careers, and you've had kind of fairly long careers in other areas. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a published writer. Like, how was that for you? How did we get to where we are now with a book out in the world? Because I imagine both your journeys are very interesting.
I didn't write anything at all until I was 47. So I'm 54. But I didn't write anything until I was 47. A friend had been invited to join a writing group and asked me to go along. And I thought it was hilarious because I'm not really the sort of person who joins things. And also because I'd worked as a chef for years, I tended to work a lot in the evening, so I didn't really have that kind of free time.
Yeah.
And she kept at me, and I must have been curious or something, so I went along and like the first meeting was excruciating. Everybody else had like written for years, and we're trying to put aside an evening a week, and to have deadlines and feedback and everything. And when I was asked why I was there, I was like, cousin Eve made me come, so I just made a show of myself. But I agreed to try and write a short story, so I worked on that for around 5 weeks, and I think like really quickly I thought, the story was terrible, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I just think that really quickly, like probably by the time I got to the end of the first paragraph, I thought I didn't really want to do anything else. It was kind of nuts. So
that's really nice. And how does your friend feel about you having a book out?
Great, actually. And she, like loads of people, like Una Mannion, who had a book out with Faber, was in that writing group as well. And Niamh, the friend who brought me along, is a great writer. She's won competitions all over the place, been published in Sting and Fly, and
Nathan.
Yeah.
That's good. And how about you, Stephen?
Yeah, it's a similar experience. I'm not a chef. I worked in IT for 25 years, and I'd always had some notion about being a writer, but was too afraid to do anything about it. Kind of just scribbled away in a diary, kept notes to self for years, and then about 4 or 5 years ago, much like Louise, I did a course. Just threw myself into a course at Sting and Fly at the Irish Writers' Centre in Dublin, and exactly the same. I like walked into the room with 9 other people, and I thought, okay, everybody here knows exactly what they're doing.
Did you do the 6-month one? Was it the
winter
one?
Yeah, with
was
Sean
June?
O'Reilly.
Did June do it?
June was on the. So I did one course with June Caldwell, and then did the 6-month one after that.
Okay, very good.
But I had total, utter imposter syndrome. Like everybody here knew exactly what they were doing. And I think the great thing about courses, I found anyways, it's deadlines, and you're in a room where everybody else says, this is serious, or as serious as you want to take this, and you're going to get analysed, you're going to get critical feedback, and you're going to be pushed to keep going. And that was the course that I was on. We still meet every 2 weeks, and 4 out of 8 of us have got book deals now, which is pretty, like Louise Nealon, Sheila Armstrong, June Caldwell, Liv Derwin. There's brilliant people on that course. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah. So, from a place where writing was just this alien thing that I had no business talking about or attempting, it's just, through being around other people, it just became a thing that I did. And like Louise, I just wanted to keep going. Once I started, I just wanted to keep going with it, really.
That's fantastic. It just seems like there's such a supportive writing community in Ireland as a whole. Like all of the writers work together and lift each other up and kind of build this thing which has led to actually Irish writing having kind of a status internationally as being of extreme quality, which I would say is correct. How does it feel to be classed as an Irish writer within that tradition? Sometimes it feels like quite a heavy mantle to put on.
Yeah, I've had sort of funny questions about that because I'm from the north originally, and I've had people very pointedly asking me, am I an Irish writer or a writer from Northern Ireland, with the capital N-I, which, I mean, I don't know, I'm a writer from the north of Ireland. I think because I've lived in all 4 provinces, it's just a bit more fluid or something.
Well, I was actually thinking when reading this book that it didn't feel like a Northern Irish book. It kind of feels like an all-island book because it does move around.
Yeah.
Like there's a really strong sense of place, but that place shifts.
Yeah, it's kind of vaguely in the northwest, I guess. Yeah.
Was that intentional?
Stretching over.
To kind of
I didn't really know what I was doing, so I just had ideas for stories and kept writing them. So it wasn't really a plan. Yeah.
Fair enough. How does it feel for you, Stephen? Any pressure to be an Irish writer?
I left Ireland when I was 21, and I only got back, 8 or 9 years or so ago. So I spent a big chunk of my life, as you did as well. You were gone. I think a lot of Irish people, writer or otherwise, you end up spending a large chunk of your life outside the country. It's quite common. So I don't feel there's any particular capital I Irishness in anything I do, and I don't know how you would set out to do that. I think you'd kind of make a mess of it if you were trying to Irish up a book. It's just you write what you write, and the stories. There is a sense of place in some of them, but it's about people and emotion, and hopefully more universal than specific.
Absolutely, yeah. Something you said there, Louise, reminded me. Joseph O'Connor gave a lovely review to the book, and he mentioned that something really nice about it is the kind of chimes and resonances between the different stories. But there you said you were like, I don't know, I was just writing stories. So I wondered for both of you, the difference between writing, say, a short story and writing a collection. Like, do you feel that this is a piece of art as a whole that works as a whole, or is it just a collection of disparate parts to both of you?
I think the first story that I wrote for the collection was Hunter Gatherers, and that was years ago. It was when I was doing the MA. I mean, it's had a good bit of work done on it since that first draft. But and then I'd have an idea for another story, and I just kind of kept going like that. And I think it wasn't until maybe I'd written about 8 or 9 stories and forced myself to kind of look at them together that I could see that there was any sort of pattern. I mean, there are maybe characters who turn up in a couple of stories. Stacey Rainey, I was kind of obsessed with her, so I didn't want. And also, she didn't really give a great account of herself in Bullock, because she's last seen bent over a sink, covered in fake tan with somebody's husband behind her, and I thought she could do with an opportunity to redeem herself. So I put her in which one was it? Which one did I put her in? I put her in Hands as the sick child's mother. So yeah, there were maybe a few things like that, but it wasn't really deliberate. Yeah. Fair
enough. Stephen, how about you?
Yeah, I don't think there's any recurring characters. I think there's. I was trying to have a kind of a sense of progression towards hope, because some of the stories at the start, people were kind of reaching towards achieving some kind of breakthrough in their lives and failing to do so. And my editor Charlotte said, we've got to kind of think of this as a mixtape where we're going to end with a little bit of positivity. So there's I dare to use the word arc. There is a kind of a reach towards a kind of a more hopeful conclusion as it progresses through. And I think I'm particularly love it in Louise's story. I think if you read a collection of short stories, it's about the cumulative effect of it, really. Whether the stories tangibly connect to each other is there is a sense of a whole feeling about it. And I think that's definitely true of Louise's book. That's something I'm kind of aim for in my own as well.
I would say it's true of yours too. Yeah. And I would agree, actually. I find I much prefer to read a short story collection like together than, say, a disparate short stories. Or, you know, some people will read short story books and they'll dip in and out.
Yeah.
But I actually find that I'm like, no, I want to know where this is headed, you know, even if there's not that much in common with the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Stephen, you mentioned that you worked in IT, and something that came through in the book for me is, you know, there's a lot of focus on like categorization and information gathering, automation, and I wondered, did that come through from your work? And if you could speak a little bit about that theme in the stories.
I will happily nerd it up for you right now.
Please do, yeah, by all means.
Yeah, a lot of the work that I do, I didn't actually, this wasn't conscious what I was doing, but someone pointed out to me, is I spent a long time doing kind of instructional design, like writing technical manuals,
okay, that makes a lot of
instructions,
sense. Yeah.
and all that stuff. And those things, you know, when you read them, they're really supposed to be the most unliterary things possible. They're supposed to be completely clear and do this, do that. But I find a kind of an odd poetry to those things. It's the way that they're structured. Sometimes there's a kind of, they're often written in a very removed tense, and that the author is kind of not present in them. And I do often imagine, what if you took those really literally or tried to elevate them in some way? So there's a story in there, Wonder House, that is all about assembling a piece of flat-pack furniture, or the unified terror of lockdown, trying to put a piece of furniture together, and just breaking down those instructions and trying to imagine yourself into them, and then adding your own instructions to them, which when I started doing, I thought this is just a bit of a lark, this is just an attempt at comedy, but it actually turns into quite a dark story.
Indeed.
It goes to a different place in it. And there are other stories where someone is working in a call center and again trying to automate certain processes within it. So I was trying to find those little bits of technology that kind of are backgrounded in a lot of our lives, but are actually, I think if you lean into them, they can be full of emotion and strangeness as well. So that's, I think, some of what I was trying to bring to it.
There's a story with the self-checkout machine that like spoke to me very deeply.
Yes,
the rage and frustration of the
will
self-checkout machine.
I'm not. My family have now banned me from engaging with self-checkout machines. It's just, they just don't work. I mean,
I know what you mean.
These things, they just do not work.
Yeah, my partner always goes to them, but then always ends up more frustrated. And I'm like, just talk to the human.
Yeah.
The human knows how to do this.
And there's
better
always
than the
someone there
machine
who's
will.
like, I'm here to help you. I'm like, oh, can we just do this? Do we need this
do we
thing?
need this guy? Yeah. Absolutely. I actually really loved that story with the automation of the phone line. It felt like a kind of an attempt to explain Ireland to a robot. You know, it's like, this isn't going to work here. You can try and have an automated phone line with no voice, but it's just not going to happen.
People in Ireland don't.
No, they don't play by those rules. To bring my partner in again, he's recently moved here from Australia, and this past year has felt a little bit like that for me. It's like, no, you can't just hear the rules to a thing and then follow them. It's just not going to work. There are secret rules that you don't know yet.
I did work years and years ago. I worked on a project in a call center where it was all about automating, because they're all about efficiency. Can you shave 30 seconds off the phone and then scale that up? That saves time. And someone running that call center said, our ideal model is nobody ever calls us. We don't want to deal with the public. We prefer to have zero interaction. I just thought, what an unbelievably depressing thing to say.
I did wonder if you'd pulled that from real life, because there are some bits in that just feel like farcical. They're so silly, where it's like, you know, our goal is that no one calls because they have become so frustrated with the system that they choose to never call.
Yeah.
Like
that's what all those companies want. They want you to sign up for a 12-month contract and then forget about it forever. That's what they want. Yeah.
I wondered, actually, with that working in IT, I feel like there's a very methodical and kind of rigorous approach to problem solving. You know, there's a lot of like raising a ticket and fixing the thing and you know, doing it efficiently. Have you applied any of that to your writing process, or what was it like to move into a more creative space?
I would love to pretend I was able to. I had no idea what I'm doing. Just throwing down very rough drafts in the early days of those courses, bringing them in, having them, going through the mortifying but incredibly valuable process of people ripping them apart and telling you what's wrong with them, and then draft after draft trying to build them back together again. I think I speak from my own experience. If I try to be too methodical and try to set out with any kind of clear intention, it just won't work. You have to just could be a bit raw and wild, at least getting first drafts down, and then maybe tidy up and tighten up the language and think about what the words are doing afterwards. But so maybe in a second, third draft, some of that more precision comes in. But first draft I think has to be rougher than that. Would you?
For sure. And Louise, I mean, actually, the world of chefing is incredibly precise and efficient. Also, did you bring any of that to your writing?
I don't know. I didn't think so. I thought it felt very different or something. But I think that maybe there was something that was familiar about it, which was that because until like 2 years ago, I was doing a PhD supposedly full time, but I was also working about 4 days a week. So I was having to, on the PhD, I was doing it in Belfast. So and I live in Sligo, so I was commuting, and so I was having to fit the writing into kind of slots of time. I'd maybe get up at 5 in.the morning sometimes, or I'd be working late to try and get it done. Actually, that was completely delightful. It was the rest of it that was hard, But there was maybe something familiar about cooking or working as a chef, which was like just turning up when you're knackered at bloody awful hours and just trying to keep going until something, the equivalent of something hitting the plate that's half decent. So I guess it was that. Yeah.
That's funny, actually. There's like I feel like there's this notion of like the writer being someone who, is kind of struck by the gift at an early age and then just like lives in a shed somewhere having beautiful thoughts and occasionally putting them down on paper, meditating on the sea for a while, that kind of thing. But actually the life of a writer is often, balancing work and life and carving out this time for your work out of the day to day. I wondered, like, is that tough for both of you still, or do you have a bit more space now?
At the moment, I don't need to have another job. I mean, that might change, but at the moment, I don't need to have another job. So that's great. But actually, weirdly, I'm probably not getting as much work done. I think it's that kind of, if you want something done, ask a busy person. So I was arguably more productive when I was flat out and knackered all the time. But
Maggie O'Farrell has a lovely, she wrote a lovely piece about how, like, writing and being a mother, like it just forced you to find the time to write between, like when your child sleeps or when after the laundry's done folded or whatever. And I remember being around 18 thinking, should I just have loads of kids and then maybe I could write a book? And I was like, no, that's a terrible idea.
That is
that's terrible advice. Totally agree. In the same way that kind of IT has worked its way into Stephen's book, I thought that there was a lot of really lovely food writing and also not food writing in this book. So there's some really gorgeous scenes of cooking, but then there's also some people that just live off like very sad frozen lasagna. And that seemed like a nice contrast to me. Did you intentionally work food into the book?
I don't know. I think food is kind of fun. I don't know. I think it's because I've been like feeding people since I was about 20, like feeding people all the time. And it certainly felt like in the last year I was feeding people a lot. My husband's there, he'd probably argue. I think food's kind of interesting because it can be kind of aspirational and it's kind of nearly political or something as well. And I think maybe in fiction it's a good tool because it can be used, I guess, to seduce or to piss people off or to express anger or resentment. So I think if you're sliding, super value cut price lasagna across the table at somebody who's been working in a shed all night, then you're kind of annoyed with them. There's not a lot of effort being put in. So,
And then there's that beautiful story at the end where she bakes the garland cake?
Oh, for him? The cake here in Garland Sunday,
And then he has to carry it down the mountain. Yeah. It's such a great scene.
When he wanted to feck it into the hedgerow or something.
You have to read it. It's very good. Another thing that really joined the book together, I felt, Louise, was just like tiny little references occasionally in the stories to like Irish folklore and myth. They just kind of were dotted in there in this way, and it felt like they functioned for me to create a sense of unease. Like this kind of like, you think everything's okay, but actually there's a fairy fort nearby, so something's probably not right. Were you using that as a mechanism intentionally?
No, I didn't do it intentionally, but I think there's maybe something about where I live. So, like we live in Sligo town, but I mean, I think I really thought about this during lockdown when we were only allowed to walk a couple of kilometres away from the house, and 2 kilometres from our house is that place Gibraltar that's in one of the stories, which is this sort of broken 1950s. Swimming pool with views out over, I mean, there's a big good out Hummer sewage, but there are views over to Benbulben across Sligo Bay, and then 2 kilometres in the other direction is Carrowmore, which is the biggest megalithic burial site in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I think there's maybe something about, I mean, I really love sort of wildflowers and trees and, sort of natural things, but I'm kind of fascinated by the built environment, and I think in Sligo, you're reminded of that all the time. Just that humans have been moving across the landscape for thousands of years and leaving these marks. And the marks could be, it could be the cairn on top of Knocknarea, where Queen Maeve is supposedly buried. I'd like to think it's her. Or it could be a ghost estate. Yeah.
I love that bit, yeah. Like the very first story, the ghost estate, there's like one line where you're like, and there's the sign for the ghost estate is in a fairy fort. And I was like, no.
Yeah, but there was, stuff like that did happen.
You can't be doing that.
It was just a terrible lack of respect or something.
Indeed, yeah. Something that I noticed about both collections is that you both kind of have very a distinct voice as a writer, just a really beautiful use of language that is very much all your own. Do you find that came with time, or that when you started writing, your voice was always there? Like, is that something a writer creates, or is it something that's inbuilt?
I think it's reaching for it. I think through draft after draft, I did want to attempt, maybe this is just natural being a kind of debut book, is to try different voices, to try to approach stories from what would be like if a child was telling the story, or if an older man was telling a story, or was like a machine was telling a story, but experimenting in those. I always, when I'm looking at things that are in a different voice, what's really important for me is it's not just a technical exercise. It's not just, can I do this? Does it have an underlying feeling? Does the language serve a purpose? Is it loyal to the voice itself? So that's what I was trying to reach for in it. You don't want it to be just like an experiment. It needs to land itself and feel real and true. So that's what I was trying to go for in the stories.
How about you, Louise?
I think there kind of a couple of things about voice. So I guess there's the voice of whoever the narrator is, or whoever. It might be the main character, or it might be somebody else, or whoever is actually telling the particular story. But then there's maybe something about the writer's voice, and I guess that's where, I don't know, things like whatever relationship you have with language, and mine's probably a bit, well, not even complicated, but like I grew up in the north. I lived there until I was 12, and then we moved to Kildare, and now I live in the northwest. And there's this sort of formal English that you take in as a reader, so I guess we all have that if we've read a lot. And there was the kind of Ulster. There were words that were, I didn't know what they were. I figured out later that they were Ulster Scots words that we would have kind of used a lot that I didn't hear here. And then I guess the kind of Hiberno English and the particular way that people spoke in Kildare probably slightly differently from the way they speak in kind of Sligo, where I live now. And I guess all of that kind of feeds into it, that you're working off those different, I don't know if lexicon is the right word, but yeah, absolutely. So all of that kind of feeds into it. And maybe voice as well is about the way you see the world, I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. The relationship between that and maybe use of language or something.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And with that, with the moving around a lot, I wondered, that can create a bit of a patchwork. And when you sit down to write, do you ever think, this doesn't sound enough like one particular voice, that area that I'm trying to nail, because I have myself become a patchwork of different voices? Or does it just kind of come out in a specific dialect or a specific region for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I think maybe because we moved at that age, and my family are all very good mimics. So when we moved to Kildare in the beginning, and we probably spent about 6 months of just making each other roar laughing by the way that people were saying things, because it just sounded so unfamiliar to us. And I'm still obsessed with not necessarily what people are saying, but how they say things. Like when I was working with the copy editor on the stories, we had these ridiculous arguments about things like, not loads of arguments, but things like, I'd have written something like, "What happened to you?" And she'd say, "What happened to you?" And I was like, "No, it's like, what happened to you?" This sort of thing, where, there'd be drop pronouns or other things happening. And even things like the H versus H thing in the north, which is actually a signifier of identity. Yeah. So, I had, which story is it? I think it's in the first one, where, your man spelled out her name in Coke on the table, and her name's Sarah, and at the end of it, so I had written, Sarah ends with a H, and she was like, "No. Sarah ends in an H." It was like, "No, it doesn't in Sligo." So, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. I only moved back here about a year and a half ago from living in Scotland, and I left when I was 18, so similar to you, spent a lot of time away. And it's been this odd process of rediscovery of stuff that I thought I was like, oh, is that just the way I say things? And then realizing, because I moved to Galway and I'm from Cork, that there's actually a load of stuff that is specific to Cork that I didn't even know I said, and then that I've also absorbed a bunch of stuff from Scotland. Like I started saying H, and then back here, like I think a week in, I was saying H again.
Yeah.
And then hadn't ever realized that I'd corrected myself at age 18, like around and about, because people just didn't say it. What was your experience of working with a copy editor like Stephen, actually? Because you're both with British publishers, so were there arguments?
There were a few disagreements, certainly. About I think same as Louise, you have to be protective of. I wouldn't even call it vernacular. It's just how characters speak in the book. My favourite incident that was that there's a line in the book about a priest going off to a communion, and someone says something to him like, "Enjoy the bouncy castle," and I got a note back saying, "Why would there be a bouncy castle at a communion?" I'm like, "You ever been to a communion in Ireland?" Minor, but you have to defend and protect against those, because that's how I think identity comes across, as specific choice and use of language. It's just listening to what Louise said about moving around. I lived in America for a long time. I lived in London for a long time. I think that active language, it's how you try to assimilate, and I think it's a choice you make subconsciously or otherwise. Is, do I want to speak like the people around me so that they will, I will feel part of them, or do I want to defend and protect my identity, and define myself in an opposition or in difference to that? And I think there's a lot of that in the book as well. I think the other aspect of language is, regardless of where you are, is where you work as well. If you work in a corporation, like I've done a lot of the time, is they all have their own languages, and they all have their own tech speak or corporate identity, and it's a lot of that seeps into the book as well, because I think that's the other thing. When we have to go to offices and do these jobs, sometimes you just have to put your head in a completely other place and try to speak like all the other people. So I think there is a lot of richness in that external language, talking the company game versus what might actually be going on inside your own head at the same time. So I try to tap into some of that.
Absolutely.
As well.
Oh, I totally want to come back to that. Before that, I just want to agree with you to say that, assimilation is a really big part of it. I found out that I can't even say the name of the place I work properly because of Munster Irish. So it's the Court International Festival of Literature, but no, it's not. It's Court in Galway. And I was like, I'm saying it wrong. And now I correct my family when they say it. They're like, wait, how do you say it? Is it wrong? And I'm like, it's just Connemara Irish, that's all. But that corporate identity, that's such a lovely idea, and it really does come through in the book. There are so many characters who, they just, even in the reading that you gave there, they just, all of their emotions, all of their processes are worked through this idea of like some sort of quantitative aspect, right? So it's like, are we winning? Are we up? Have we reached 100%? Is there any variance on our expectations for the quarter? And it seemed to me that it was especially with male characters. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, still in the corporate world, there is that language is a form of control and form of power. So the title story, as you mentioned, that word variance in Shine Variance is about variance from a target. So the male character in it, his boss is Adam, saying, "Where are we? We're 14% off target. There's a negative variance, etc." It's a way of kind of saying, "I'm really pissed off with you, and I'm really angry with you," but controlling it in very distilled, refined language. And I'm fascinated by that idea of how we communicate with each other in these forms that feel like almost set piece exchanges of information. And this, I still work in IT most of the time, and we still have these bizarro conversations where people say, "Well, looking forward into next quarter, I have an optimism about this." I'm like, are you happy? Are you sad? Do you want to cry?
Do you have a feeling? Are you a robot? Yeah.
But we all do, and it's in a way it's protecting ourselves. You don't, there's this kind of trite expression, you're supposed to bring your whole self to work. Well, nobody does, right? You kind of you put on a game face, and you keep a lot of your emotions or your feelings to yourself, and you deal with them in other ways. But if everybody's doing that, we are, make some jokes about robots in the book, but we are kind of acting in a kind of robotic way when we communicate like that. There's a much more real conversation to be had underneath, and that's what I think a lot of the stories are about, are people, that surface cracking and then realizing I'm not who I am pretending I am, and that's a recurring theme.
Yeah, it feels like a thought experiment of like, what if you were to take that language home and express and try and work through interpersonal relationships using that. And I feel like, the results are fairly conclusive.
Yeah, you'd be a severe variance from your family, I think, if you
tried that. Indeed. I wanted to go back to the editing question, though, because both of you have been published quite widely with Irish journals, and you're part of that Irish writing community, and I wondered, is it a different experience to, say, be edited by The Stinging Fly as opposed to a British editor who doesn't have that knowledge of, say, tone or Hiberno English? Does it feel different for you?
Hard to say. I mean, my only, like, going back to what we've both said about a non-Irish editor raising a query about language, like, no, I certainly had the experience of saying, well, you must write this in received pronunciation or it's game over. I mean, there's generally a feeling, at least with Charlotte, my editor, is we want to make this authentic. So, you know, the language needs to be believable. And if that means it's written in a certain way, that's fine. So there's very few hard lines were drawn around that. I don't know if you felt that. I generally felt reasonably in control of that language.
I didn't have too many, actually. It was okay. They were kind of, they were pretty cool about a lot of that stuff, I found with the copy editing, it was things like that I didn't realise that apparently I have a thing about the colour yellow. So she said, you do realise that all of the cars are white and then everything else is yellow. I was like, what? I don't even like yellow. But yeah, so that all had to be fixed, but I had no idea. And then I think the exact same sentence appeared in 3 different stories. I nearly had a heart attack when she pointed that out. Like literally the exact same sentence. I was like,
I love
what?
that.
Yeah,
that's
things
brilliant.
like that.
That would definitely be
I
my
didn't
fear.
notice at all. Yeah.
That's fab. So you both have full collections of short stories out now, but are you working on something longer? I have heard rumbles of perhaps another form being in the works. So are you working on a novel, either or, both of you?
Yeah, I'm probably on about draft 7. It feels like about draft 95 of draft 7 of a novel. So yeah, hopefully it's nearly there.
And can you tell us anything about it, or are we?
It's set in the north in 1975.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it's about somebody who's fallen in love with somebody they shouldn't be falling in love with. Yeah.
That age-old question. Yeah. How about you, Stephen?
Yeah, working on a novel as well. So we draft 3 or 4 at this stage with a ton of stuff still to do in it. So working on it over the summer and into next year. It's based around family life, so it kind of extends on some of the themes in the book about families getting mixed up and probably people falling in love with people they shouldn't. But we both listen to the same Buzzcock song. I think that's what it is.
Yeah. And have you found it different working on a novel as opposed to a story? Like, how's that different for you?
I think I had to approach it differently because sometimes with the stories. With a few of them, I knew what the last line was going to be, like literally knew what the last line was going to be, but I didn't know what the hell was going to have to happen to get there, which is kind of good. And I don't plan at all for stories. And then, as well as that, sometimes if I don't know how to push forward, I don't know if you do this, but so I'll write maybe the first couple of pages, and then I don't know what the hell to do next. So I go back and just edit, and then you've got this really tight couple of pages, and then you actually just have to keep going. Yeah. But then sometimes that's tricky because the tone can be different towards the end or something, and then you have to put a lot of work into fixing that. Yeah. Well, that's what I do. I try not to do it, but I just knew that if I'd taken that approach with a novel, I'd have written like 2 chapters or something. So I had to just go hell for leather at it for, I think it took about 3.5 months or something. Okay.
Just get as much of it out as possible.
Yeah, I just forced myself to word count every day, like feeling like throwing up all over the laptop, but just like force myself to write a couple of thousand words every day for a few months. Yeah,
that's fascinating. And how much of that initial draft remains? Like, does it get shaped to the point of kind of beyond recognition, or are the bones of it still there?
There are probably paragraphs that haven't changed a word.
Really?
But then I had to lose like entire characters and as well. So
I am fascinated by that kind of structural edit and how a writer actually goes about, say, for example, like excising a character from a text. Yeah, it must be so complicated.
I've been working with my editor on that because I told her. When Bloomsbury bought the novel, I just had like 10,000 words that I put like a few manners on, and then a 1-page synopsis, and then this completely it was like the work of a madwoman, this draft, and so it needed a lot of fixing. And I told her that I'd need some help with the structural stuff, so I got a little bit of help with that. Because it's quite hard to see it when it's such a big thing. Yeah. And I didn't want to start doing. I know some people make big graphs and things, and if I did that, I just wouldn't even want to continue. I think there has to be a bit of mystery or something. Are you a plotter or a planner?
No, I just push into the dark. I did the same as you. To get the first draft, it was like 3,000 words a day. Even though that felt like someone said, being as a writer is great, isn't it? You have homework every day and then you die. That's basically and it's. it was just keep going, just get to an end, even if it was like the first draft. There isn't much punctuation. There's whole passages where it's not clear who is saying what. It's just get it down, as you say, kind of, you know where those key plot points are, get to them, move past them, and then step back and go, what is this? And then refine. But totally different to a short story. I think a short story, I find anyway, you can know at least what the image is going to be, or at least an image that's going to lead you to a certain point.
Yeah, or you can get away with just like a moment or something like that, you know, that it can just be almost a moment.
Yeah.
Whereas, it just gets, I don't know, I used to have this recurring nightmare when I was a child that I was in the back seat of the car and my sisters were on either side of me and I was meant to be driving. I was about 7 and but I couldn't reach the pedals or the steering wheel or anything. And that's kind of sometimes what the novel felt like. It's like, what? Yeah, it's like, get me out of here.
Yeah,
but
you just got to keep driving.
Just keep going.
Absolutely loving the difference between both of you speaking about coming to writing at the start of this event, where you were like, yeah, I started doing it and I just loved it and I couldn't do anything else. I would never want to do anything but this. And then you're like, but how's writing a novel? And you guys are like, it's the worst. It's the worst.
Shit in a brick.
Oh, well, I look forward to reading them. That's absolutely brilliant. So the other thing I wanted to touch on is the use of person, like first, second, or third for you. I feel like both of you have like a comfort area in that. Like you tend to stick to the third person in this kind of omniscient voice, and you do a lovely trick of setting it up with one person and then switching it like a couple of pages in, and you're like, oh, we're following this person now, cool. Whereas Stephen, I feel like you tend to focus more on a kind of a stream of consciousness, you know, within someone's mind. Are you guys aware? Like, are you like, yeah, that's my favorite mode to write in, or is it just kind of come out organically?
I think certainly not a kind of a conscious awareness that this is the thing that I like to do. It's just how they've come out. So I've tried. There are several first-person stories in there. There
Definitely,
are a few.
Yeah.
There's one second person. There's not much third person. Yeah. Maybe I just inhabit the language of the mind.
Yeah.
At run, slightly easier, but then you do use your phrase. You have to put manners on that as well, otherwise it can sound like an awful lot of just kind of running stuff. I think you need to tighten that up and keep it specific.
Actually, reminded me of like coding.
It's a bit like coding.
Yeah, a bit like coding.
It's a bit like you have to get your instructions and your cycles correct so that it makes sense. But yeah, I think. As long as the voice is true to itself, I don't really have a particular favourite. It's just they come out how they come out, I think.
And both of you have one story in the second person in your books, and I wondered why second person for that one? What was it that it could do that nothing else could do at that point?
Yeah, that was kind of an accident. So I was trying to write the story that ended up becoming Sparing the Heather, and I knew that there was a body somewhere, and I knew that there was a woman who really didn't like her husband. And but I didn't. I tried all kinds of different things, and I was getting nowhere. I probably worked on it on and off for about 5 months, and I think I'd written like, I don't know, maybe 30,000 words or something. I mean, it wasn't a linear 30,000 words. Like, bearing in mind, I ended up with 4,000. Like, it was a lot of work, and I tried all these different things. And then one day, in complete desperation, I started trying to write this vignette or like a flashback in the second person. And it didn't feel as like terrible as the rest of the story, so I just kept going with it, and it ended up being in silhouette.
Okay.
And then after I'd finished that and it was published, I went back to Sparing the Heather, and I knew how to finish it because I think I'd maybe dealt with lots of other things in that story. So that was why it wasn't really deliberate. Yeah.
Fair enough. How about you, Stephen?
I think it's I only attempted it once. I think it's a tricky voice to maintain over a long period of time. The story, the leash that's in the second person is the character in it. I think he uses it as a way to distance from himself and to look in on himself in a somewhat accusatory way, somewhat admonishing way, and I think that voice works for that. But over a short period of time, I think I'd struggle to do it much longer. Wendy Erskine, the great writer, said, often when people slip into that voice, you end up sounding like a terrible Bob Dylan song. It's all you this, you that, you this.
Yeah.
Well, then some people are brilliant at it. Lucy Calder's amazing at it.
Or Sarah Baum.
Yeah.
That's the whole book.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
That's true.
No, that's a really good point. What I liked about that story, actually, the leash, though, is that by putting it in the second person, I had no idea the gender of the protagonist. It took me until the very end of the story to figure it out, and so
that's interesting.
and I had automatically gendered them as a woman because I was reading it. That was fab. I'm going to turn to the audience for some questions now, but just before we do, I wanted to say, did you know that you both have pampas grass in here?
We did.
Yes.
And that you both make the reference. So weird.
DMs on Twitter.
That's so funny.
Does anyone in the audience know this? That apparently if you have pampas grass in your front garden, it is like a tip to neighbours that you are swingers.
It was a thing in the 70s, yeah.
It's in both books.
Yeah.
Everybody knew that.
Yeah.
I did not know this at all. Yeah, and so I read it in Louise's and I was like, that's mad, isn't it? And then I picked up your book and I was like, what is going on here?
I tell you who didn't know that, my parents, because there was
Really?
pampas grass everywhere.
We drove past them today on the way down and I was like, swingers, they're swingers, they're swingers.
It's a giveaway.
So, well, now you know. And who said that fiction couldn't be educational? We'd love to have some questions from the audience if that's possible. I believe there is a roving microphone at the back of the room. So if you would like to put your hand up, we will call upon you. Please do not be shy. We would love to hear from you. Go on, lads. If not, I'll just keep asking questions, which is also fine. Yeah, go on. You're as good.
So, as first-time writers or first-time published writers, have you found, having opened your heads and thrown it out to the world, have your nearest and dearest changed in how they see you, or has anybody commented that, my God, I can't believe you think that way, or have people just saying, yeah, that's exactly how I expected you to come out with something?
Someone else warned me that people will go looking for themselves in stories, which, I mean, there isn't anybody that I know in those stories, but my response to anyone who says, I think that's about me, is like, wow, check your ego. You think I just wrote about you? Other than that, no, I don't think so. I think it hasn't really, I mean, it's so early for me. This is only like 2 weeks in. Maybe things will change, but nothing really specific, I don't think.
It's actually someone waiting at the back of the room to let you know.
Yes.
You've changed, Stephen.
You've changed.
These 2 weeks have changed you immeasurably.
I probably found that, I think some people were surprised that they thought they were a bit dark, whereas I didn't even think that. I thought they were kind of funny. And then they were like, oh my God, like terrible things happen.
Brilliant. Have we any more? I have one more question. So if anyone does feel the desire to ask a question, please raise a hand and we can go to you last. Wait, no, we have a microphone for the recording. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to ask Louise about the balance between dark and light in her stories, because I found them hilarious in parts, but always coming away with a lot of empathy for the characters. So I was just going to ask you about the balance. How did you get that so well?
I don't know. I don't know. It wasn't deliberate, but I think there's maybe something about having been reared in the north, and I do think that I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Lyric Theatre in Belfast, but it was always, because everywhere else was closed, and it was always like going to the theatre was a big night out, and there might be a play on with like torture scenes in it. And people would be roaring, laughing at parts of it and stuff, and not particularly fazed by the very dark bits. I think it's maybe a northern sensibility or something. I think it might be just that things can be like absolutely atrociously grim and completely hilarious as well. So I think there was maybe that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I noticed when reading kind of around your books in advance of this event is that you guys are kind of being positioned as an antidote to the like young cohort of Irish writing. They're like, you guys have been around the block, which like I think it's a little bit reductive. They're like, over here in one corner we've got Sally Rooney and Megan Nolan, and then over here we've got Stephen Walsh and Louise Kennedy, and they're going to fight. How do you feel about that? Because I feel like you're all part of a whole, but perhaps...
I love the word antidote. We are the double jab.
Yeah, double vax, ready to go.
To the coming-of-age variant.
Wow.
Yeah, because I feel like people, people in these stories are learning things, just as people in, say Sally or Nisha's stories are learning things.
There were a few people really annoyed on my behalf, and they were like, they don't ask men what age they are. Why do they keep talking about your age? But in the meantime, and I don't give a shit. I'm not trying to pretend to be any other age. That wasn't bothering me at all. But in the meantime, I was getting messages from mostly from women my age who said that like for various reasons they hadn't managed to write until they were older, and they were encouraged. So if that's the case, it's fine by me. I don't mind.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I've only heard exactly the same. It's like,
Yeah.
whatever age you come to writing, great. If you're writing brilliantly when you're 22, brilliant. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do it. And honestly, I hope this is true. Once you start reading a book and you're connecting with it, who cares how old the writer is or
Yeah,
where they're
fully
from
agree.
or anything? Just,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
you know, get
Like
into
you
it.
don't read a classic and go, oh, well, this writer is dead, so that means this about their work. You know,
Yeah.
exactly.
Shouldn't
I
matter.
think there's probably a lot of pressure on writers in their 20s and stuff as well, who get a lot of attention maybe for a book. Like, what do you do next, or what? You remember that
Yeah.
Kevin Power
Yeah,
article
that article
is really
oh my
powerful.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the one about Megan Nolan's.
No, it was just about he published this hugely kind of lauded and successful
Yeah,
novel
yeah.
when he was young, and then just found it very difficult after that for a
Yeah.
long time afterwards.
Didn't write another one for 12,
13
years. And he's
yeah.
been incredibly open about that
Yeah.
experience. It was almost too much too soon. For
Yeah.
him,
That's
you know.
fascinating, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I respect that. Like, take your time with it, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, to close out the event, I was wondering, do you have any, say, advice or wise words to anyone who is thinking about getting into writing? I feel like, you know, you've done such a good job here. Share your wisdom.
Yeah, I'd say just do it. Give it a lash. I don't know. I mean, I think the main thing is probably just to give your permission to write a load of crap as well, because that's a lot of it is. Do you know, like out of all the tens or hundreds of thousands of words, you know, you'd be lucky to walk away with a healthy looking few, really. So I think that's the main thing, is just probably do it every day in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice. Be prepared to fail a lot, and most
Yeah.
of it is failure.
Yeah.
Most of it you will maybe whittle 1% out of what you write that will actually make it through. Personally, I would say go on a course. If you're the kind of person who likes going on courses, I find that incredibly helpful, just to be around other people who are going through the same thing. It's supportive and you challenge each other. That works. I know it's not for everybody, and it's harder to do over Zoom now that we're kind of back getting close to those things, do it in person. But yeah, just throw yourself in. I think.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today.
Thank you
It's
very
been
much.
really,
Thank you,
really
Sasha.
nice to get to quiz you a little bit and to be so physically close to so many other human beings.
Yeah, great.
Thank you all, audience, for coming along as well. Cheers.